This is America's first greatest generation. People from all walks of life who experienced the Revolutionary War and then lived into the age of photography in the 1840s and 1850s. In the early 1800s, the United States government created a new set of legislation, pension acts, meant to guarantee a monthly payment to aging veterans of the Revolutionary War. But many of these old soldiers had no evidence of their service. So instead, they went to their local courthouses and magistrates and recorded detailed oral memoirs of their Revolutionary War service. Over 80,000 applied for pensions, and this amazing trove, the nation's first veterans oral history project, sat largely unutilized in federal archives for over a century. The museum's pension project pairs those pension memoirs with today's generation of veterans, asking veterans to reflect on similarities and differences between their service and that of people over 2 centuries ago.
Jeffrey Brace was an African-American man who served in the Revolutionary War in the 6th Connecticut Regiment. He wrote a memoir in 1810 and applied for a pension in 1818. In his memoir, he wrote about his birth in West Africa, his enslavement, and his wartime service. His memory was impressive, and he told stories about the dramatic battles and soldier humor. My name is Eugene Richardson. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm currently 97. I'll be 98 next month. I'll be 98. And during service, I was in the 99th Fighter Squadron, which was a part of the 332nd Fighter Group. Well, I'd wanted to fly since I was a kid, young kid. But just by coincidence, I was working with a guy servicing record machines. And the guy that I was working with, the white guy, took care of the money, and I took care of changing the records and lubricating the machines and so forth. And a policeman stopped the car that I was in. Now this was in 43, I believe. The policeman stopped the car that I was in. Now at that time, when a guy was 18, he had to register for the draft. So the policeman asked for the license and the insurance and the draft cards. Well, I told him, look, I'm only 17. I don't have a draft card yet. But when I go into service, I want to fly. I want to be a pilot. Well, this police officer saw this young kid, this brown-skinned kid. He did not think of some low-skilled or low-intelligence brown-skinned person. He told me to go to the customs house in 2nd and Chestnut and take an exam. And if I passed the exam, I could qualify to become a pre-aviation cadet, and I wouldn't have to be drafted as other 18-year-olds were. And things worked out. I took that exam and passed the test, and that made me a pre-aviation cadet, and I was held off in reserve until I turned 18, and then I was called into service. Well, I just wanted to fly an airplane. I wasn't interested in killing anybody or getting shot at or anything. But I finished flight school in 1945, in March 11, 1945. And the war ended a couple months after that. So I did not go into combat, which was okay by me. We remember many battles, but the end of the war was what mattered most. At last we returned to West Point and were discharged as the war was over. Thus was I a slave for 5 years, fighting for liberty. After we were disbanded, I returned to my old master at Woodbury, with whom I lived 1 year. My services in the American War have emancipated me from further slavery. Although there are similarities between my service and his service, during World War II, the military was rigidly segregated by race. A lot of that with the thought that we could not perform at a high level, but our performance inspired President Harry Truman to issue Executive Order 8891, which ended segregation in the military. And I think that Brace's service also inspired commanders to be more willing, more open to men of color serving in the Revolutionary War. He was fighting for his freedom. Even though he was enslaved, he was fighting the war, looking forward to his freedom after the war. Now, we were in the war actually fighting 2 wars. We refer to it as a double V campaign, in that we were fighting against the Axis and fascists over in Europe, and we were also fighting against racism here in the United States. My service gave me a tremendous advantage in that we were able to continue our education under the GI Bill, and that, of course, permitted us to increase our own status. On the 4th day of April in 1818, before me, the subscriber, one of the judges of the Franklin County Court, personally appears Jeffrey Brace, age about 78, resident in Georgia in said county of Franklin. That said, Jeffrey Brace enlisted in Woodbury in the state of Connecticut in the fall of the year, but he does not recollect, but thinks it was around about 1777, in the company commanded by Captain Granger and Colonel Megg's regiment in the Connecticut line. Afterwards, he was transferred to Captain Baker's company. He was in the battles of White Plains at Stamford, Westchester at Mud Fort in New Jersey, and received a wound in his leg at the capture of Mud Fort, and retreated with the American Army to Red Bank. He says, although he supposed he enlisted for 3 years, yet as he was returned for during the war, he cheerfully served 5 years and 9 months, and that he is in reduced circumstances and stands in need of assistance of his country for support. Well, many people don't know that even though there was slavery, they don't know that slaves actually fought to free the states from England. They don't realize how involved African American men were in freeing us from England, and that we should have some kind of a pension as a result of that service. During World War II, the Tuskegee Airmen fought to remove the stigma that men of color did not have the necessity to be military pilots, and that we had to actually sue the Army to get a chance to be military pilots. But by the end of the war, men of color as pilots were the ones that were highly thought of and requested to be in the service. I would consider both of us as being trailblazers, in that Jeffrey Brace was honorably discharged with merit, and proving that men of color could be good soldiers, even though they did not want men of color to be soldiers during the war. And the same thing was sort of true of Tuskegee Airmen. We proved that our service was most valuable, and as a matter of fact, contributed greatly to the victory that we had over the Axis during the war.